Hello, it's Lou Collins, and today I've got another one of the Craft World templates for you, and we're going to be looking at a waterfall card. This is for me one of the most difficult cards to create without a template. I've not seen many templates or die sets on the market to use, so this is a really handy sheet of paper. It gives you the basic mechanism for the waterfall effect, and then you can go ahead and decorate it in any way you want and actually place it onto any size or shape of card that you wish. So I've already started cutting out some of the elements. I've got the long panel here, so what I do, and there is another video for this, is I use spray adhesive to pop my A4 sheet of paper onto a piece of cardstock, and then I use that to cut around all my elements. And then, because I use repositionable spray adhesive, I can then peel off each of the template pieces and reuse those if I want to, because they remain tacky. So I've got the mechanism piece here, and that includes some score lines here. Now on the sheet we've got 4 boxes here, and you can cut those out. You can use all of them, you can use just 2 of them if you want to. I've actually gone ahead and I've reused my squares, and I've actually cut an additional one, so I've now got 5 boxes for this card. Aside the boxes and the mechanism, you also have this bar here. If for your card you find that you actually want the bar to be longer or wider, and you'll see that in a moment as we construct the card, you can of course do that because it's quite a simple rectangle. But essentially this template is going to give you the basics for getting to know how to work and how to construct the waterfall mechanism. So let's get started with constructing this. I've got a card base here, so this is around about A6 or 5 by 7 inches roughly. I've matted and layered this with a beautiful apple blossom paper from the bouquet collection, I believe that's what it was, and that's got blues and greens in it. So I've got a green card base, I've got blue cardstock here. I've matted this with black cardstock just because I think it makes it pop a little more, and I'm going to be using black on my elements when I start placing them onto my waterfall panels, but that comes later on. So the mechanism here, you'll need to score along the dotted line. So you'll see on your template that you've got dotted lines here. You can score across all of those, and all the solid lines are to cut around. So this is a really easy template to use. So I've scored those in advance, and what you want to do is fold each of those over into, so you're almost folding the piece in half, and they're not concertina folding, they're all folding round the same direction, okay? We want these to be really nice and flexible, so don't use a cardstock that's too strong for this, but alternatively, you don't want to use a paper that might tear. Now you'll notice when you've folded this that one end is longer than the other. This is going to be the end that you're going to pull down. So I've used a single-sided cardstock. The inside is white. That means I can put the word pull or an arrow or something like that there if I want to. I may even trim this into an arrow shape and put a little piece of ribbon or something or a tassel on there. That will come later with the decoration though. So position this when it's completely folded, so you can see all of the score lines there, into the center of your card, okay? That is going to just be positioning for now. We're not gluing that down. What we are going to glue down though is this bar. So this bar, what you want to do is place this across the base of the blue here, the front panel, but we're going to glue it underneath there. Okay, so that's going to hold that in place. So I'm going to place some glue, just wet glue. I'm just using Cosmic Shimmer here, and I'm going to place that over the top here. Now I prefer to use wet glue when I'm using anything that's got a mechanism, because I find in the long run it's going to hold tighter, but you could use something like a double-sided tape for this if you wanted to. You could even use hot glue, but I find hot glue, as strong as it is, it does then come up quite bulky. So I've then got my bar, as you can see, attached to the underneath of my front panel there with my score lines at the top. Now this, on the 2 ends, we want to then glue this down onto the card base. This is the only part that's going to be secured to the card base. Now just test your mechanism at this stage, if you can, by holding down these 2 pieces and nowhere else, and just pulling on this tab, and what you should see is that that will fold up. Now it's not going to be the sort of flickering at the moment, as you'd expect from a waterfall card, because we're going to put our panels on there later and they will flick up as we roll this down. But what we want to happen is for this to remain in place and for that top mechanism to be able to fold under itself as you go up and down. So if you're happy with that, we need to apply our glue to the underneath of here on these white tabs. Again, I'm using wet glue, but I'm being very careful to keep that to the edges of the tab. I don't want to get anything onto this back panel here, so just be careful of that. But you need to have that back panel folded under now, because it's going to be very difficult for you to fold that under later on. So just coming into the center of the card as best I can, making sure that I've got, when it's closed up like this, you've got a nice even border at the top and bottom and at the two sides. You can add decoration to balance things out later on if you want to. We're not going to want to put too much decoration or bulky items in, because we don't want to affect the mechanism. Anything that's going to go on these panels needs to be no wider than this, because this needs to effectively roll under this gap that we've just created here. So again, now that's glued down. Once you're happy that that's glued, this is maybe a little bit damp still, but I'm going to be careful and just roll that through. So making sure that your mechanism hasn't got any glue on it and it rolls through nice and smoothly. So now the next stage, and that's to apply our panels. Now I would say probably decorate these, but don't glue the decoration on. So you can, at the moment, you can do things like mats and layers and such like ready, or you could stamp onto them. But if you're adding embellishments and things, probably don't do those until this is all together and working. I just find that the easiest way. So as I said, I've cut the 4 from the template and I've got an additional one the same size because I really want to fill this, but you can just do a couple if you want to. And what we're going to do is we're just going to apply glue to the top of each of the panels. So we've got one here and we're going to apply glue on there, like so. Just again, minding that that glue doesn't go anywhere besides where it should do. Now I'm going to pull this down and I'm going to make sure that when that first tab folds over, there's no glue on here, and I'm then going to do the same. I'm going to glue onto this tab, keeping within those score lines, and I'm going to place this on there. So you can see that as you roll each of these down, you're then revealing the full tab from underneath. Okay, so repeating this through each of the sections, and when this is folded up, which I'll do in just a moment, once I've glued these down, we'll be able to see them all laying together, but they'll be laying on top of each other, so you'll only see a small amount of each of these squares, and that's why you're revealing maybe messages, embellishments, pictures, could even be photos as you roll the waterfall up or down, whichever way you want to look at it. We're just placing this last couple on here, so I've got one there, and then I've got one more score line, so that will fold, and I've now got a panel here. This is why you don't need a 4th square, because you've got enough on your a 5th square, you've got enough on your template, but I've just cut a 5th one so I can get my matting and layering exactly the same. So I'm just going to pop this on there, and then the matting and layering and everything that I do on the previous ones I can place on there as well, and just keeps everything neat. But that is completely preference. That one's not going to move, that's as far as that will go. But as we push this up, as long as your glue's all dry, you'll notice that you get that lovely folded effect, and it all then lays flat afterwards. So now we need to go to the decorating. Each of these white squares have been cut from, it's a thinner paper, it's not a strong cardstock. I don't want to make the mechanism too heavy. I've cut them down to 1 3/4 inches. I've then stamped into the centre of each of them a small sentiment. They've all come from the same stamp set, and that's this one. It's called Sentiment Verses from Card Making Magic. They're nice, quite small sentiments, so many of them will fit in there. There's actually even one that says surprise, which would make a really nice tag for this card if you wanted to. And because I've got a black border going around my matting and layering, I'm just going in with a little bit of black around the edges of the white panels. This is just going to help them stand out and look a little less flat on the card, because we do have to glue them on flat. We can't put them on with foam tape or anything, otherwise the mechanism won't work. So I'm just adding this shadow around the edge. So now these are all inked around the edges, I can glue them onto my panels. Just like I say, with a wet glue, no foam tape around here today. Just popping that on into the center. So 1 3/4 inch squares will sit nicely with a little border there. So I'm going to put these quite randomly. I've put the front one, which is quite an in-depth one, so quite a long sentiment. But each of the others, I'm not worried about the order. It may be that you're writing a message. This would be lovely for either a baby reveal card or maybe a proposal card. That would be fantastic. But yeah, it doesn't really matter for me which order these sentiments go in. Just popping them all down. So I've got sending paper hugs and kisses. And then again, just being really careful that the glue's not getting on any of the mechanism there. It's really simple to keep everything separate anyway. It's actually, when you've done this once or twice, you realise it's actually quite a simple mechanism, but we've simplified it even further for you using the template. But once you've used that template a few times, there's no doubt that you'll probably be able to create your own quite easily, just with a scoreboard and some scissors and a ruler or a trimmer. There we go. So we've got this. Now you can add elements to this as well if you want to. But as you can see, everything folds up beautifully. Now lastly, I'm not going to put too much embellishment on here. I want to keep it quite simple for now. You could put flowers and such around, but again, just avoid this mechanism. What I am going to do though is I'm going to just trim, as I mentioned earlier, some corners into the end of the tab here. So I'm doing this freehand, but you could be a little more careful about measuring it if you wanted to. And I'm just going to pop that arrow in there, and then I'm going to take my hole punch. So mine is a crocodile, but you may have a different one. We can just pull this out to be able to do this bit a little bit easier. And I'm going to place there just a hole in the end. Now before I go in and add my twine, I'm going to just blend a little bit of ink into the end of this, really just reusing what's on the end of my brush here, just so that it all coordinates with everything else in the card, so it doesn't stand out as being too white. And then I've got some twine, so I'm just going to pop some twine through here, and I'm going to do that by folding my twine in half. It's quite a thin twine, so it should go through okay. Folding it in half and just giving it a little twist to make it as sturdy and pointed as possible, popping it through from the reverse of the hole through to the front, and then looping putting the hoop over the ends, the tails of the string, and pulling that tight. So I've got a nice neat pull tag there, and I'm just going to trim those ends. There we go. So let's just check our mechanism once more. When it's all closed, you can see this now blends in nicely with the white panels on here, and we've got a little pull tag. Nobody's going to be able to resist pulling that. And then there's your waterfall reveal mechanism, all done nice and easily using the template that you can download from Craft World.